teachers, policy groups, anybody who has a say, a voice in shaping or directing where education is going. I'd like to hear from them, and I synthesize that insight and I bring that into different R&D teams, product development teams at Smart, should the vision of where Smart's going in the next 5 to 10 years, along with a bunch of other really intelligent people that work at Smart. It's not just me. If you're on Twitter, that's where you can find me. Feel free to connect with me there. That's where I share a lot of the insight and stuff, the cool people or places that I've been. I've met some amazing people this week. Been to amazing schools, had some really good conversations. Shared some of that on Twitter, so you can follow those people as well. On my YouTube channel, I like to like this, when I have an opportunity to get on camera or record something of value, or people that tell me that it's a value, I record it and I post it. So this is one of them. So here's the topic. We're talking about creating environments for students with Flourish. So this is like the last 5 years of insight kind of synthesized for you. What we're going to cover is three key ideas. One is addressing the fact that technology has an Achilles heel. So what is that? And then we're going to get into, I guess the second part of it is, what can we do about it? So of all the insight that we've gathered so far, what's a framework that we can use to have success in that? And when we look at that framework, it's about creating the best conditions, and it's also about the support for teachers and what insight we get from that. I should let you know that this whole deck, I'll give it to you guys, so make sure you have a copy of it in its original format and notebook. As well, for those of you on YouTube or Twitter, I'll put a link for you to download a PDF in notebook file at the bottom of this description. All right, so Achilles heel. So I don't know if you know God, or it's not really God. He was this Greek warrior Achilles, and he was almighty, all powerful. He would destroy 200. The day that someone shot an arrow and it hit him in the heel, and then he loses it. That was the end of it. And so it's to say that sometimes Achilles heels to signify the technology. We think technology is all powerful, like it can save the world, it's amazing, we should buy more of it. But technology too has an Achilles heel. An Achilles heel of technology is that it hasn't improved student achievement. From OECD, this came out in September 2015. They looked at literacy and numeracy performance correlated with access to technology. So technology. But they're lower performers in literacy and numeracy than, let's say, a country like China, who has like top-ranked literacy and numeracy teachers and students is very lower than most countries. And so what they found is that is not impacting literacy and numeracy performance in countries. And if you talk to Andrea Schleider, who's the one who came out with everybody, it's not that we should stop with technology. It's that we need a new approach. Right? So we need a new approach to looking at technology's use. Achievement. This is like meta-analysis. Over the last 50 years, the impact on technology and education has been flat. In other words, over the last 50 years, there's been successes, and then there's been failures. And what's interesting is, when you average all of that out, we're flatlined. So overall, in the last 50 years, technology has not had an impact on student achievement. And the reason why anybody who's into tech or watching this, we want this to happen, right? We are investing in technology because we believe that it should have a positive impact on student achievement. And the reality is that it hasn't. Right? It looks more like that. I should note that this file, there's all the resources that I talk about are actually in the links in the left-hand corner, so you can actually, if you want to go deeper into it, thing I made up. This is G. Hall. I took a course with him. He has this concerns-based adoption model with Author. But he published his paper in ISTE 2010, talking about exactly that. Technology is Achilles heel. It's trying to achieve high-quality implementation. It's a challenge. It's a problem. We're not there. We're not doing it. Best possible chances for getting success. I'm going to share with you a framework which I found probably to be one of the most simplistic frameworks, of which all other frameworks, when I talk to technology directors or implementation specialists, their frameworks fit under this one. So this is a framework that I find kind of, if you have this in your mind, and if you're someone who has to support educators or a district or school or a country, if you have this framework in your mind and you're making decisions based on it, then you're doing the right thing. Now, this isn't something I created. It's the Goldman Implementation Initiative. So the people who specialize in implementation and diffusion of new content, every country has different organizations, people that study this and get together to share their insight and practice, not just in education, in healthcare, in business. Well, this group got created to pull all those people together to share their insights. They get together every single. And one thing that I took was this framework, which is to get any social system, you need three things. You need to define the effective intervention. Now, effective means it's proven. We know clinical trials have taught us or showed us that if we do these behaviors, we get these results. We know 100% that's what effective intervention is. What are the practices, what are the behaviors to get a specific result? The second is the effective implementation. And so the first one has to do with what you do, right? So the first one is the what. The second one is the how you get that to a mass group of people. So how do we get those practices, those behaviors to that desired population? I want to bring to your attention, they're multiplied. They're not additive, they're multiplied. Why does that matter? Well, let's go a little course on mathematics with us. Let's remember, everything times zero is zero, right? So let's say we do a really good job, and we're like at 0.9, let's make it as 1, times 0.1. So you focus on, talk about what are the best possible things we do for implementation. So that's what we're going to have today. But before we can go there, we have to define what we want to put, right? So what is a social? That means we have to look at what stress is. And students, and the definition of what we define as a student being successful is actually going to change. Now, this really cool YouTube video, I don't think I can watch it, people know, that depicts, it gives us a sense of how what we define as a successful student is shifting. Now, I'll tell you where I got this video. You start doing research on, what our employers want. And it doesn't matter what country you look at the research from, they all say the same thing. And that's what? It's not just literacy and numeracy that they're looking for. They're looking for what? What are some of the other skills? Collaboration. What else? Communication, right? Critical thinking, right? I want someone to be, there we go.
Okay.
Let me crank this up.
Maybe not now.
Let me connect it so you can actually hear.
I can get this straight on over
All right, here we go. 30 seconds.
And the configuration of its legs, it just wasn't meant to support all that extra weight.
Technical skills and people skills. At George Brown College, we know what employers value most.
So when do I start? You don't, son. You don't.
Right? 30 seconds at the entrance requirements for some college universities, they're starting to pre-filter based on. So they're asking kids to submit videos or portfolios of completed work to get a better picture of the entire student. Right? So they want to pre-filter based on some of the skills. Now you might say, okay, that's great, but so PISA testing is one of the things that one of the assessments that they do. They assess literacy and numeracy rates per country. GDP. They look at the correctional system. They look at amount of healthcare costs. So they look at the general health of the country. Well, when you have these, what do? You compare them. Numeric perform extremely well, right? In countries where kids are highly literate and numerate, there's less spending. There's less spending on facilities. There's lower unemployment rates. Right? Standardized testing focusing on these. In part because OECD publishes reports, which is policy. Policy then translates into what you see on your report, and that's your priority. Well, 3 years ago, they asked the question: are numeracy the best predictors of student success, or are there others? And what did they find? They're not the only ones. 3 years ago, they defined social and emotional living skills. And kids across the globe, think about what that means. Tested kids. OECD is now going to start ranking countries based on kids' self-skills. that correlate with the health of the country. Think about it. That means my little Marco, who's 18 months, comes from school in high school, might go home not complaining about his 80 math that he wanted to get a 90. He might come home complaining about his communication, his speaking, which I'd be way more proud of than his 84 math. The plan is starting in effect this September, and in it, you will see the exact same version of the OECD paper on that social emotional. What does that mean? So even in the tech plan, there's conversations about thinking about. It's not just about developing genes to play in the future. Now that we're redefining what future success looks like, we have to think that not just focusing on the literacy and numeracy, which we're prioritizing right now. We have to think of technology and planning for technology so it's developable. So here's a piece for the next 20 years. Get there is if we focus on what are the valuable things that we can do, interventions, good luck, how we actually get a mass group of, and that's what we get at that success. Things that we've learned. What are the evidence-based practices that we know work, have the highest possible chance of getting us students to find success in academia? Well, there's no shortage of them. Theories of learning. There's tons of research papers that show, this works and that works. I see a paper that says, oh, we saw student gains when doing that. I say, so what? What did you compare it to? Right? Show me what that beat. Because I can pretty much any study that you find can show positive impact on student learning. There was a study done on education and impact on student achievement. This guy studied it. And what he found is that basically, when you compare all the things that you can do to have a positive impact on student achievement, almost everything works. So the average effect size is 0.4. The average effect size is 0.4. So pretty much 80-90% of things that you can do in education will have a positive impact on student achievement. There's very little things that have a negative impact. And a shocker is reducing class size sits somewhere there. Right? So relative to all the things that we can do and put our money towards, right, there's better things that we can put our money towards. And it's this stuff here. And so the question is, what are those behaviors? What are those practices that sit up there which stand out from all the other things that we can do? Those are the things that we need to be focusing on, right? And so Patty did a really good job, 2 words, in defining what those things are. And it's visible learning. Right? So creating opportunities to expose the learning, to make the learning visible to the teacher. Why? So the teacher can respond to it, can do something about it once they made that visible to them. So what does that mean? It means, when kids are sitting in class, the teacher needs to create opportunities where this teacher can see the byproducts, not at the end of the learning, but during the process of learning, what that student is thinking, right? So it's almost like they're in the eyes of the student, right? So it's almost like the teacher's in that kid's brain. So how do you design tasks so that you expose the learning to the teacher is the concept there. Now, what's interesting is, we have guys like Graham Nuthall who put microphones and cameras in thousands of kids in classrooms, and the researchers observed what happened. And he wrote an amazing book on it. And one of the quotes, 70% of what happens in the classroom, a teacher's oblivious to. So the reality is, how good are we at visible learning right now? We're not. We don't create opportunities to expose what's happening in classrooms because Graham Nuthall research tells us that the teacher's usually oblivious to what happens in the classroom. The other quote stat was 50% of what a teacher teaches, the student already knows. Right? So something simple as, before you get started, you define your learning outcomes and success criteria, then you ask the kids, right? Send out a question. We have technology now. Send out just a quick, here's what we're going to learn today. Let's see how much these kids know of it already. And we can quickly, before we even start 5 minutes into the lesson, the teacher can get insight into what the kids already know in the lesson. So I think technology will have a role to play in changing that. I really believe, now that the kids have those devices, we can use those devices to make that really visible to the teacher. I'll show some examples in a bit. So here's the other piece. When you expose learning, when you make learning visible, the other piece is it's in the student's face too, right? So they get to be reflective practitioners. And they get to see learning through their own eyes and be their own teachers. And also the peers, right? So if they expose it, the peers see it, instigates conversation, they can be their self-learning. So there's a lot of positive byproducts that are exposing learning. Now you might say, okay, that's Patty's work. Is that it? Is that the holy grail? The answer is no, right? But if you look at other researchers that have done meta-analysis on what has had a positive impact on student achievement, and you start crossing all the high impact strategies, there's tons of overlap. And I'm going to share with you some of the overlap when we look at teacher behaviors and student behaviors that I found common between the two. And I'm going to actually compare Marzano and Hattie, who's both the meta-analysis on the topic, to show you some of the high yield ones. And this is just these two guys. I've seen another thinking as well. First thing, mindset. Right? If you're a teacher and you walk into a classroom and you do not believe that every single kid in that class has the capacity to succeed, then it doesn't matter what you do next. Right? So how your mindset matters so much in terms of teaching and learning. Focus. As soon as you start at the onset of learning, you define the learning outcomes, you make it crystal clear for the students so they understand what they're going to learn. And the success criteria, how they're going to know that they've been successful in learning. Right? So defining that at the onset of learning. And this one keeps popping up all the time, and I have to bring it up, direct instruction. Which a lot of people are like, oh, we want to stay away from direct instruction. No, you want to stay away from sage on the stage, which is what I'm doing right now. Right? Direct instruction is not what I'm doing right now. Direct instruction is like a conductor of an orchestra. Right? I used to play in a band, in symphony, and the conductor never touched the instrument. He was just there conducting and telling us when we had to be quieter, or keeping us on pace or on tempo, or telling us to come out, or telling us to stop. So direct instruction done properly has significant impact. Direct instruction done improperly is sage on the stage, and that's what most teachers actually do. The direct instruction is proper. All right, let's look at student behavior. It's no surprise, kids need to be physically active in the process of learning, right? Physically working together, constructing their knowledge. And in terms of knowledge, it's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about applying that knowledge into new context. It's about revisiting concepts on a regular basis, creating multiple opportunities to get feedback, concrete feedback to guide the next step, and kids working together. So these are practices that kind of fall on the high-end side that a lot of meta-analysis researchers are agreeing upon as being some high-yield practices. Okay. There's something interesting here to help you conceptualize these concepts, right? Because it's not about memorizing these concepts. I want to give you a way of remembering the general idea of it. And it's funny because it lives in your lives every day. Right? Those of you that have kids, right? Do me a favor, turn to the person beside you and talk about what you see in this picture. What do you say?
Moving. Lots of
Movement. You can connect these concepts to it. John C. Brown. Actually, he's what island does he live on? He lives on one of the islands, not Oahu. He lives on one of the islands in Hawaii, and he made me cognizant of this concept. So, one of his neighbors is a pro surfer. Right now, you might think that's not uncommon. Hawaii, lots of pro surfers. There's never been a pro surfer on that part of the island, ever. And this neighbor of his, this kid, and his buddies who live on the same street are pro surfers. So he asked them, how is it that you're pro surfers? And he said, come and watch it. They go with their laptops, their tripods, their GoPros, they get on the water, they come back, they watch it, they get on YouTube, they watch each other. Think about it. Those kids who get in the water believe that they can do those tricks that they see those pro surfers doing? Absolutely. That's why they get in the water. Do they have a clear focus of, here's what I want to do, and this, I know I'll be able to do it if I can do that, right? Do they sometimes need someone to model or guide them? All the time, right? Their buddy tell me, no man, you got to put your foot this way or that way. Or maybe they watch a YouTube video that's actually physically showing and modeling what that looks like. They're not just talking about surfing, they're getting in the water, physically trying it. Do they try it once or twice? No, they keep at it. Maybe a year from now, they'll come back and try that trick again, right? Tons of feedback with each other, even by themselves, and usually it's done in a social context with other people. And I think this analogy of kids can help us understand those high-yield practices if we think of the natural ways kids are living outside the classroom. My daughters last year wanted to learn, actually today, it's actually 18 degrees in Toronto. It was like -3 at Celsius the other day, and now it's 18. So they found their bikes and they bike ride. Right? They just learned how to ride their bikes themselves. And then what I did is I took my 5-year-old and my 7-year-old, and they were on Strider bikes, and I took out the training wheels from their pedal bikes, and I said, try to figure out how to use the pedal bike. And I just watched them. And it was amazing how when they failed is because they either gave up and thought, I can't do this, right? In which I needed to encourage, you can do it, just keep trying it, right? And I was like, okay, Dad. How they kept going at it. How they were, no, Lorena, you got to do it this way versus that way. Giving feedback, working with others, right? It's amazing how if you stop and observe kids in the natural environment, they do that without someone telling them, hey, did you know that evidence-based practices tell you that to learn something, right? And I think it's this natural thing that we can, if we stop and think about, the natural ways that we learn stuff outside the classroom and our kids learn, how can we build elements of that into our own space? So, nothing, if we look at highly competitive sports, I don't know if you recognize this is Shirley Bourne, Olympic figure skating champion, gold medal champion at the World Championships of Figure Skating, she's Canadian. She now coaches and does the choreography for some of the world's best figure skaters. In fact, I think it's China's male had the best score. I think he scored a perfect score, the first ever perfect score in figure skating. He just had, I think, last year. She happens to be the wife of a good friend of mine, and so I asked about, and when I even talking with her about what she does and her philosophies about how she trains and works with others, and it's basically this stuff, but to a high degree. It's this stuff, but to an exceptionally high degree. Right? And that's kind of what differentiates world champions from the rest of us. Right? And so here's the kind of the synthesis, right? When we're creating environments, when we're thinking of the physical practices that we want to engage in our classrooms, the litmus that we should be using and what we should be using in our mind to plan is, am I creating opportunities where I can expose the learning to me, the instructor, so that it can change my practice and my behavior? The second thing is, step back and look at your clock quiet. Because right, so use that as a filtering. We've had this technology and all these tools that were there to aid and support and facilitate learning. And, we've replaced those with, some other shiny, new tools. But we're not satisfied, right? Because in cases with front-of-room interactive, we feel that it's promoting the sage on the stage practice. And in cases where we have student access to devices, we're complaining because it's creating device isolation, right? So things that are contra to the high-yield evidence-based practice. That's the reality of the classroom. Now, when you look at, OECD does studies on teacher perceptions and also teacher practices and behaviors in classrooms. This is a CALIC studies. Generally, when they ask teachers about the types of practice they want to engage their kids in, it aligns to 21st century practice. But when you go deeper and you look at the behavior, very few of them across the globe even use ICT in their classroom on a regular basis. There's a very small percentage of teachers that are actually using ICT and technology in their classroom. Now, take that, plus take the OECD report that said tech isn't improving student learning. We decided to do a study over the winter break to go deeper and ask, okay, let's look at all the different technologies that can be in the classroom. Projector, interactive projector, front-of-room interactive whiteboard, interactive flat panel, or neither. Let's look at devices, Chromebooks, laptops with keyboards, student cell phones, software, different types of software for creation, co-construction, software that has for gaming, or just self-paced, so a variety of different types of software. And practices. We want to look at what teaching behaviors and practices, and what practices in terms of the ones that are high evidence-based practices. And we're trying to see how does that all intermingle. Who's doing what, and what output or impact is this happening. I put a link to it. We're going to publish a report probably in the next week or so. You can put your email ready to get a copy of it, which reminds you I have to edit it. Put that this weekend. And what did we find? Well, here's something interesting. When we categorized and clustered teachers, I should mention one of the things that happened was we actually focused on this group. So teachers that were high users of technology in the classroom on a regular basis. Every single day they had access to technology. We didn't look at all teachers, we looked at this group here specifically. Of the ones that are using ICT on a regular basis, let's correlate that with outcomes and practices. And we clustered them. we put them into two different categories. Those that use technology frequently go over here. Those that don't use technology as frequently, remember everybody uses it frequently, those who use it less frequently in this category here. We also filter them by types of practices, the pedagogies that they use. These would be low users of the pedagogy, higher users of the pedagogy. What did we find? Let's start here. Low technology use and no pedagogy. 11% outstanding success. Right? So look at this. Basically, this curve tells you that the low tech, low pedagogy, the majority had limited or mixed success. Let's shift over here. These are those that use technology frequently, but practice it less frequently. Outstanding success is a little bit higher. That was 11%. So it's mixed. So it's like flipping a coin. Right? So in the presence of technology, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And that aligns to the 50 years of technology being flat, right? That aligns to that. Let's look up here. Low tech use, remember, it's still technology use, but lower than that. But high pedagogy use. Now we start seeing something like that. Complete opposite. With those high evidence-based practices in play, even without tech, we got way more success. And over here, high frequency technology, high practice, the complete opposite. Okay? So what does that mean? And even, Andreas Slater said it, technology is like a magnifying glass. It magnifies amazing teaching. It magnifies poor teaching. Well, in fact, it doesn't necessarily magnify poor teaching. It actually might increase the chances of poor teaching becoming better. So I kind of contradict on that. But it definitely, when you do see high practice in the presence of technology, it absolutely magnifies it. Because here is high practice in the absence of high technology. It's definitely magnified. So we know that that's the mix. Technology, when used with those specific practices, does get us to those successes. Now, there's some other interesting things that came out of this data. We looked at behaviors of students and their use of devices. So turn to the person beside you. What do you think happens more? Do students consume content more with their devices, or do they create content more with their devices? Just turn to the person beside you. Tell them what you think. You can tell me. Are they consuming content or creating content with their devices? Well, turns out they're more passive consumers than they are creators. And in fact, that's not surprising, because just before that Common Sense Media did this massive study in the US, some of you might have read it, and they looked at how teens and tweens, so teens are 8 to 12-year-olds, teens are 13 to 18, make use of media outside of the school. They didn't look at in school, they looked at outside of school. We look at inside. Now, here's the interesting thing. Sorry, I'm going to take my finger. Sorry, let's go back there. Okay. All right, so what do we find? So we find that of all the behaviors, the lowest behavior was creation. Kids outside on their personal time only create 3% of the time. I don't know about you, but I was concerned when I saw that. Why? Here's one example. We talk about higher order thinking skills, right? We want students engaged in the types of brain, not on low level, memory recall type tasks. We want to do this kind of stuff, engage the brain, like higher order thinking. What's at the top here? And we've been talking about this forever, right? But look at the practices of our students outside the classroom that we as parents enable or promote. Or look at the practices inside of our school. I had a chance to meet with Norman Bushnell last year, and just a week ago with, what's his name? Inventor of Apple, Wozniak. And I asked them, what do you do to supplement the education for your kids at home? And what do? They create like maker spaces for the kids at home. To do what? To consume content? No, to be creators, right? To physically build stuff, create stuff. Right? Here's another piece of interesting insight that came out of the paper. We looked at collaborative practices. So when we looked at all, and we filtered thinking, there's like physical, like what teacher practices that they engage your students in, and we clustered the teachers in teachers that do practices at a high level, there's teachers that do it at a low level. What was interesting is we got these peaks, both for the high and the low. And then you ask, well, what's in there? All of these things have to do with engaging students in collective work, which means of all the practices that engage students in, collaborative practices is the one you engage your students in the least. What's more is when you filter the teachers that actually engage students in collaborative practices most frequently, they actually find success. So what does that mean? We don't engage students often in collaborative practices at school. Those that do find success more often than all the others. And of course, we have to ask this one, this hot topic, right? Does interactivity actually matter? Right? And we already know the answer to this, right? So here's non-interactive displays. So we filtered all the different types of frontal viewing systems that are not interactive, and then filtered them with all the frontal viewing systems that are interactive. We looked at, compared how frequently they have success and not success. So we see this is mixed. It's here. Clearly there's more success when it's interactive. Now we've seen this, we've done tons of studies in the past. There's some really rigorous analysis of even a teacher teaching the same content, split the kid in half, even filtered by distribution of student performance, taught same lesson to this half the group with one class, and then got the same lesson to the other group on an interactive display, which is a non-interactive display, and then looked at the impact on kids' performance in the lesson. They did in thousands of schools. What did they find? 18 times kids who actually sat on the interactive display outperformed the kids who didn't. The question is why? This past year, cross-functional group at SMART, including our research guys from the R&D group, we got together. We wanted to try to understand why those results occurred. Because now more than ever, and some of you right now are in schools that are wondering, should we buy an interactive display or should it just be just a standard panel? Right? And we'll just use like AirPlay or something just remotely, just to share content. And so I put a link here. There's basically a 25-minute version of this. I'm going to give it to you in like 4. I'm going to break it down into, so the answer is yes, interactivity does matter. And it matters for all 3 types of behaviors that we see in classrooms. So in classrooms today, this is from the Palace study, you'll see teachers engaging students in whole class learning. You see teachers engaging students in small group learning. And you see teachers engaging students in individual. Can you guess, across the globe, which practice happens more frequently? Yeah. Right? And the idea is we want to be able to increase these percentages. Because remember that previous slide, we're getting kids active, right? If all we're doing is whole class, then it's probably less likely that we're engaging that because most teachers do direct instruction incorrectly. They do this, they do a mistake. So we want to encourage more of these types. However, technology is evolving where we can do more whole class, a lot more interactively with students. But let's take a look at in each of these types of behaviors in the classroom, why interactivity matters. And in fact, I don't care who you are, even if you're in the most student-centered space. So there's even some schools that I've seen in the U.S. that like every day the kids have on their computer, they select their own courses, they work at their own pace. Even in the most student-centered environment, there is time for whole class. They have blocks of days. So I think 8% a day is individual, 20% you're still getting groups, and you usually whole class to synthesize. Like, think of it a regular classroom. You have to start off to find, okay guys, here's what we're going to do. And at some point in the middle, you might have to regroup and say, guys, hold on, I need to redirect you. And at the end, you want to consolidate information. So even in the most student-centered, there's always a time for whole class. So why is whole class best done on an interactive display? 2 studies I'll share with you, and I put the sources here. So this is actually from Stanford. Last year he asked the question, what will people remember more, right? Will people remember more? They're watching, so they did a 7-page script they wrote out, had someone memorize it, and then they put those 7 scripts by writing them on a whiteboard. They had people come in, and then they tested them how much they remembered after. And then they created the exact same presentation, but put it on with images on a PowerPoint. 7 slides, exact same script, nothing to do. And then they created a Zen presentation. That's like metaphorical images to represent the concept. 7 pages, exact same script. They tested people immediately after how much they remembered. They tested them 2 days after how much they remembered. Can you guess what happened? Well, this is the percentage of memory retained, and this is the type of presentation that actually fell like that. People remembered more when they physically saw someone there. More than PowerPoint, and way more than Zen presentation. We can go to any conference, and what do we see? We see more of these, right? And we definitely see a lot of those. Okay? I think we need to start rethinking what we do and really, when you want to share information so that the person can remember it and they can do something with it. And what this is telling us that we can rethink how we do that, how we deliver that. We want that to now, educators out there, you're probably saying, well, it's not just about memorizing; it's about in school applying what you remembered into new context. So these two guys, Fiorella and Mayo, just published in August a paper that looked at that. What did they do? They took the concept of Doppler effect, and they had this teacher memorize the script, and they had an image. They had a static image. Right? And what the teacher did was he put a static image on the board. They memorized the script, had a group of students who never learned Doppler effect before, and we taught them the Doppler effect with a static image on the screen. That was the first group. Second group, use remote thinking. What does that mean? That means the content was actually on a remote device, and the teacher was actually saying the script. The content was appearing in the right place. Right? So that's like Apple TV, it's like Deseri, like all the screen sharing applications. The content would appear on the screen. And the third one, another experiment with gesture. So exact same digital content, but this time the teacher saying the script would point and gesture as she was saying it. And the third one, she physically drew it up. Right? So as she was saying the script, she was writing it out and saying the script at the same time. That's what happened. Where were they testing? They were testing kids' not only ability to remember the information of Doppler effect, then they were given test questions, application questions, to apply their learning into new contexts that they've never seen before. This is no different than showing a static image. So if you're remote inking over the top of it, it has no impact on the student's ability to apply information in context over just putting up a static image from the get-go. The only time they saw gains was in these two diagrams. Physical gesturing and the physical learning. And in fact, this one specifically outperformed the students who had low prior knowledge. So one thing they did before is they tested kids on questions about Doppler effect before they even taught them Doppler effect, just to segment what kids knew about it. The kids who had lowest prior knowledge of Doppler effect outperformed specifically in this category. But that still doesn't answer the question why that happens. Well, there's lots of theories of learning that actually help us understand this. Part of it has to do with gesture learning. There's tons of research on it. There was one study that did this experiment. I think it was grade 2. They didn't learn about grouping yet. And the teacher would teach it by physically gesturing. And then another teacher would teach it without gesturing. What happened? The kids who saw the gesturing outperformed the kids who didn't. Observational learning. And this is kind of out of evolution. If you have little kids, the little kid always mimics what the older kids do, right? Or Bandura, I think, is known for that with the voodoo doll, where he's punching that doll, and kids mimic that behavior, but when they don't see that behavior in the adults, they don't mimic that behavior. Social agency theory is pretty cool as well. It's this concept that the fact that I'm physically here present in the room, you can see my face and my voice, you're actually more bound to the material than actually if you're watching online. Not live. So those of you live actually are probably more bound. Those of you not live are a little bit less bound. And those of you that just have it on your phone and you're walking down the street listening to me, you're totally not as engaged in as you physically watching. There's something about presence that actually matters. My favorite is mirror neurons. We asked one of the neuropsychologists, I said, okay, help me understand what's going on in the brain. Like what's going on in the brain that can help us understand why this happens. And he says to me, really busy, look at these two words, mirror neurons. And if you haven't heard that term before, it's relatively new. I'll explain it with this concept. Pretend you're watching the magic show, right? And the magician gets this needle, and he sticks the needle through his arm, and he starts right? And the whole audience starts cringing. Oh, it hurts. Why do we cringe? Right? Why does the audience cringe? It's not their arm that it's happening to. It's the magician's arm. Now, if you do a brain scan, like the magician, putting that needle through his arm, and then you do a similar brain scan of the observer, it's the exact story. The exact same neural parts of the brain of the person physically doing the behavior is mirrored in the person observing the behavior. And this makes sense if you watch sports, or if you watch someone watching sports. There's sometimes you get so into the game, it's like you're physically in the game, because your brain is. If you do a brain scan of these guys, and mimic that of the player, you would see it's similar. And so what we know from whole class instruction, an interactive whiteboard is the best way to force gesture. Because you have to physically write, you have to physically manipulate, and the best way to do that is on an interactive display, not a static display, for whole class. Right. Okay, but what about small group learning? Why is the interactive whiteboard important for small group learning? And I'll go a little bit quicker on these ones. Tons of studies on them. I put some of them on the bottom here, independent of each other. One of my favorites from Taiwan, the cameras in the room, had kids working on a project. What they varied was what they used. Some kids use laptops, some kids use laptops to share space, some kids use laptops to share display. What did they find? Communication. Right? They were measuring how frequently kids communicated and how many kids were communicating. The one that outperformed was when it was shared on a large format display. Outperformed any given. So what that means is communication increases when it's on a large display versus small display. And some of these other studies actually looked at kids' performance on a different level of cognitive tasks, completing group work on a laptop versus completing group work on an interactive whiteboard. Right? So really cool YouTube video. You can watch it. That shows the differences there. And the whole idea there is whole class is better than interactive display. Small groups is actually way better on an interactive display than not. But you might be wondering, okay, individual instruction, how is that better in interactive display? But for that, we got to use the second most watched TED Talk, Amy Cuddy. Has anybody watched her talk? So Amy Cuddy and the two other researchers were interested in how your physical body, your posture, impacts your performance. One of the studies they did, they rigged an interview. So they got half the people in the room for 2 minutes. They got them to do a closed pose, something like that, for 2 minutes. With the other half, they had them do open poses, like power poses, for 2 minutes. What did they do? They tested them, they swabbed them, and they tested for cortisol and testosterone. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Testosterone is the take risk hormone. They threw them into the interview. This guy had no idea what was going on. He was just there. What happened? Well, what happened was these guys outperformed based on his results. So these guys outperformed these guys in nature. What's more interesting? Cortisol levels were lower in this group than in that group. Testosterone levels were higher in this group than in that group. That's the stress hormone. That's the taking risks and the assertive hormone. So what did they show? They showed that even small changes in your body posture, as little as 2 minutes, changes our physiology, which changes our performance. And as soon as I saw that, I couldn't help but think of our classroom and how we engage the types of activities and environments we create for our students and the way that we get their bodies to engage with those activities. It matters. It's important. We have to be cognizant of it. And this isn't new, right? This concept that environment matters, it's not a new concept. And especially now we talk about personalized learning, it's so important, right? And everybody's attaching it to devices. Personalized learning it's not about devices. It's about giving learners voice and choice. And if we know this insight, we have to create environments so that kids can choose different ways to engage with material that we know will help them flourish. And so this concept of environment matters, comes from Robinson, the most watched TED Talk. And in it, he talks about education's death valley. I was with Jamie Cass from Google a couple of weeks ago. We were about an hour away from this death valley. It's basically this barren desert. There's nothing there. It's completely dry until it rained for like 5 minutes. And then it turned into this sea of beautiful flowers. And what that taught everybody is that Death Valley wasn't dead. It was dormant. And it wasn't until it had the right conditions for it to flourish. And so we have to use that concept in our classroom, that it's up to us to create the conditions for students to be successful. We have to take the evidence-based practices, the research that's out there, to inform and guide us how we design our learning space. So I'm going to tie all those concrete pieces together. When we're creating our environments, how do we create opportunities to expose the learning, to make learning visible? Keep in the back of our minds, am I tapping into the way the kids naturally learn outside the classroom? Those are the high-end evidence-based practices. Are we getting to create more than consume as a consumer? Right? Are we getting them to interact with each other? And how are we getting them to interact with their content? Are we making their bodies closed and closed posture? They're sitting down in a closed posture for so long. We know that having negative impact. They're physically going to stretch their bodies. And also, we know collaboration isn't happening on a regular basis. So how do we plan and design more for kids to be working collaboratively with each other so it's not happening today? Those are things. Now, I want to share with you, how the impact that this insight has had in even our technology and how we're evolving that technology. And all technologies are and should be evolving that way. But I'll show you things that can happen with technology to be able to promote that. So I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we partnered with a group called GeoGebra. They've been around since 2001. There's a PhD paper on creating a powerful math application to be able to explore mathematics in a more dynamic and interactive way. So I want you to picture for a moment, mathematics is for most people a barren and dry and arduous task. Imagine now that we can explore mathematics concepts as simple as writing an equation physically reactive. Or me changing the color, dropping it in, and then autographing. And then being able to physically drag and manipulate, and to see the changes and the impact that my manipulation has on the equation. The more tactile, instant feedback allows me to engage with the hearing and discussion, right? Allows me to be active and to physically play and manipulate and construct that content. Now, a tool that we created that helps at getting teachers beyond stage on the stage to more of a proper direct instruction approach with lesson activity builder. And part of this came from our observing, we have something called Smart Exchange, which is a global repository of lessons that teachers upload. So things like you're in a class, they upload it, you can search by country, by subject, by grade. We notice as teachers predominantly download that content 5 minutes before they teach, which tells us a couple things. One, teachers don't have time, and they usually just grab something very quick before they start. The other thing that we learned is oftentimes the pain point is they have to manipulate things. So it's not the right language, or maybe it's it doesn't cover it in depth as they need to. So they need to be able to manipulate. They want to personalize it. So we task the developers. You got to allow teachers to create something in under 5 minutes that's engaging for the kids, get them physically active and interacting with content physically, and it's the teacher's content. The teacher decides the wording of the content that's there. So with that, they build Lab, and I'll show you some examples of what Lab has. So something as this is high school, right, where they have to match a formula to its compound, right? And this could have come from a quiz that was taken, and the teacher noticed that there was a certain compound of the formula that kids kept screwing up. So the teacher creates this quick interactive game which can add game components like buzzers, timers, so you can gamify, so it's a whole gamification component, with kids spending time playing with peers, revisiting concepts, right, all that good stuff we said before, physically interacting, having dialogue with each other, giving each other constructive feedback to complete class. Here's one of my favorite grade 2 in the US, where they were learning patterning, and this is called Shout It Out, which basically connects any internet-enabled device in the classroom. And we talk about making learning visible. It connects those thoughts and ideas either through pictures or through text with the teacher. And so in this case, we kids were learning patterns, like A, B, C patterns. And the teacher said, okay, use your pencils, pencil crayons, markers, and create this pattern for me. Snap a pic. What was beautiful is the dialogue that happened. What you can't capture right now is the dialogue. So the student would send it up and compare it to the other peers and realize he made a mistake and say, oh, sir, no, I made a mistake. And he grabs it and drags it in the garbage. Let me send you another one. And instantly the teacher, because we have this ability for students' insight into their learning, and that actually, if they click on it, is unique. So you can see who might be having challenges with that. So it's a great example of instantly identifying where the teacher can have visibility to students' understanding the concept, just by taking a picture of concrete materials and things. At BET this year in England, we revealed something we're going to be coming up with this year. It's called paper to pixel. Make that process even easier. Teachers still today, all over the world, have handouts, right? Worksheets. I was actually at your school yesterday, and I took a picture of some of those handouts, and you digitized it for the teacher. And so what if we made it super simple with two quick clicks? A snapshot of that hard copy. It automatically digitizes it. You scan it to your smartphone, it creates an interactive activity. That's what we're getting toward. It's making it really easy to take existing content and turn it into something that's interactive, kids engage with kids in collaborative way, giving feedback to each other, and feedback on each other. So we're building all these different pieces inside the itself. Even things like assessment. So on an ongoing basis, let's say teacher teaching science, and took a picture of a cell under a microscope, and I want to quickly gauge students' understanding of what cycle the stage is this in. I can send the cell to the student's device, and they send it back to me and get a snapshot. Okay, awesome, 80% of the class got it. Perfect. Who didn't get it? I need to work with it. Tools like that are really powerful for teachers to have insight into student learning. Now that's a notebook, and I've been presenting a notebook. And I have to say, about probably 6 or 7 years ago, we sent teams of people out into classrooms that had wireless, that had either frontage and whatever's, but digitally devices, and we looked at what was happening, the common challenges that were happening over and over and over. And we also asked, if technology was no barrier, money was no barrier, what would you want to be able to do? And what we realized was that we couldn't evolve the notebook enough to address those needs. And 2 years ago, we had to create that. Smart Amp. Smart Amp is for spaces that have Wi-Fi and student devices. If you have an interactive frontage room display, even better. Definitely have a projector component. And what is it? It's basically a cloud-based platform. It's this giant canvas that allows students to co-create collaboration on a shared space. Most important, it gives teachers insight into the process of learning. It's not about students creating an end product. Look at a lot of products out there. It's about kids spending time to create this final video or to create this final beautiful PDF or this PowerPoint. AMP is about exposing the journey it takes to get to that end product. Right? And we built tools to be able to facilitate it. I want to show you quickly an example of what that looks like. And we set up these two boards here to show you what that looks like. And maybe we'll pan to one of the boards. Let's pan to this one. So what's involved for the student and the teacher? Well, it's actually really simple on the student and teacher's end. All the teacher does is go to smartamp.com and they type in their school credentials. Whatever they used to get in at their school, they type it in and look in. Student does the exact same thing. And this is where they get to. They get to this page, right? Now I'm in my math class, so I tell the students, guys, get into the math class. Well, as soon as they press that button, that's where a teacher can orchestrate learning. I'm going to show you what that means. I'm going to go to this one over here. I'll put in, I'll get this guy in math class. Actually, tonight, I'll get you guys actually to go to boards. And you guys can be the students. All right, so here, we're going to learn about Cartesian plane. Now, I'm just going to show you quickly. You know, this is the space, right? So this is a massive canvas. You see there's some possibility there, but I can keep going. Right? So this is big, giant. Yeah, you can go here. Big, giant canvas. And what I can do, So this is a workspace. I can actually share this workspace to my students. So I'm going to share this workspace, I'm going to hit next, I'm going to put everybody in my math class, I'm going to automatically bring you in and put you in follow me. Now watch this, this is beautiful. No more, having students fiddle with, oh sir, did you put in the Dropbox? What's the name of the file again? Yeah, go ahead and hit open now.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Hit open now. And so now, we automatically pull into the workspace. And actually, I'm driving. Right? So as I'm manipulating this page, all that you can do, I'll wait for you to load, is actually follow along. Right? If I'm going to define the learning outcomes and the success criteria, notice there's not much else that you can do. So if I go over here, there's not really a tab. Even if you plan a read from that area, it automatically pulls you back to where I'm at. Okay? So go ahead and try panning away just to show what happens. Right? It'll automatically pull you back to it. Perfect. Okay, so let's actually do an activity here. Let's pretend we start with a blank canvas, and let's say I didn't want to teach Cartesian playing. We're learning this lesson. And follow me. Watch how it can happen. This is direct instruction. I say, okay, what do you guys know about the Cartesian plane? What's involved with Cartesian plane? I don't know. Graphs. What do you know about graphs? Yeah, there's ordered pairs. What does it look like? What's kind of the background before we put ordered pairs on? A grid? Yeah, like what are those? Axes? Do you want to draw the X and Y axis for me? So here's the thing. Now I put it on displays here, but we could also have students working on Chromebooks. So I'll get you to work on the Chromebook here. Right? And take a look. Right? So now the students generate it. Say, okay, well, yeah, there's the X and Y axis. Now, with the X and Y axis, the Y actually, we put it somewhere else. You know where we should put the Y? It actually usually goes on the top. You mind moving that for me? So what's happening here, so go ahead and fix it. And then move it out. So what's happening here? Normally, Sage on the stage, it would be me physically drawing it out, making the commentary. It would be me physically putting that in the right place. But now what's changed? You guys are the ones holding the instrument. I'm the conductor. Right? You guys, and because I've made it visible, I realized, wow, the kids know about X and Y, but they don't know where to place it. If I would have put it on there, I would have known that was a challenge for you. But now I've exposed that. Because actually, the X, we usually put it on the other side. Do you mind moving that X? Moving it on the other side? I'll just select that. And what you see here is that all my students, imagine a group of 30 students in a class, have access to the content in real time. So I can do things like, someone find me a video in Cartesian plane, or someone, find me a website that goes through the history of it. And so in the gallery, you can search for YouTube videos, embed the YouTube videos, and have them pop up. You guys want to find one? Try to find a video on YouTube video. You want to find some images of Cartesian plane, or something related to Cartesian plane? And so what can happen here is, instead of me being the one who has to construct the content, what we can do is actually have the students being the ones who aggregate the content, making them active learners. Right? And now that frees me up to have the ability to go and explore and see the learning made visible to me. And what's great is I can have a student up at the board that actually organizes the content, right, while other kids are constructing the content. What you end up having is students get more engaged with the content because they're the ones creating it. They're the ones that put their brain magic into finding the content and materials and connecting to the other pieces that are there. And so at the end of the day, this lesson is a lesson that was constructed not by the teacher, it was constructed by the class. And the students can see their own work immediately inside of it. Now, I'm going to put you in start following me. Here's the other challenge that we saw with teachers with student devices is doing this. They're so busy into a task, but now I need your attention because I have to make an announcement or because I have to put you, getting your attention back once they're going hardcore on the devices. If you're working in device settings, I used to work in device classroom, you know it's challenging. That one button, right? Follow me. stops all contribution. No one can contribute. Now you're literally physically all following. I'm going to show you another example. It's pretty powerful. Turn on your pens. Everybody select a colored pen and make it a little bit thicker. Make it a little bit thicker. Imagine after I taught it, we learned all the different concepts of teaching things. I could ask a question like, everybody plot a point in the third quadrant. And what's amazing is instantly, I get feedback about my kids' thinking. Right? Imagine 30 kids in a class. Right? I didn't do anything right today. So you're second guessing yourself. Right? 30 kids in a class, immediately, I make the learning visible. Right? I can see all the kids thinking. Or tasks like, I did this with a group of educators in New York, math educators, where they plotted all their points. And I said, okay guys, let's actually construct a linear relationship. Let's make a scatter plot. That's a linear relationship. So select the cursor, grab someone else's dots, and let's make a linear relationship in the first quadrant. And what's cool is you can see, as people are moving the dots, you can see who's moving dots. Right? So we did some research on that, and when you can physically see the person's first name and last initial, and it's actually that, it's not just two initials, we test a different combination. It's the physical first name with the last initial. It instigates dialogue between students, both in room and outside the room. Why? Because if someone's grabbing your stuff and putting it in a different place, you now know who to go and talk to. And so the power of that tool is that it instigates a collaboration between students. Now, so that's an example of whole class. Right? So that's direct instruction, and direct instruction done more effectively, like just stage and stage into perspective. The other thing you can do is take your old worksheets, or even your old assignments that you give out to students on your devices, and just copy and paste them, right? And this is the first question, second question, third question. And now you have flexibility in delivery. So I can come here, hand out copies. And this, I can hand this out to individual students. It basically means every single student has a copy, and they complete it by themselves. But I, the teacher, always have visibility to what they do. Or I'm going to assign groups. Let's do that. And I hit next. I can put kids within groups of three. I might not want to put those two kids together. And I can hand out copies. What this is going to do is, let's say the three of you, you'll be put into one AMP workspace that you share. So each of you work with your devices, but you're in actually the same workspace. So even when you go home, you can see what each other is doing. And their group, they're in a separate AMP workspace, and you guys are together. Now for me, the teacher, here's my favorite part. I have visibility into everything. So imagine kids are working independently. I'm walking around watching what's happening in a very student-centered environment, and I'm looking at it and I notice a common challenge. Or maybe I notice a group is doing something that's like, wow, I didn't even think of that. That would be valuable for the rest of us to see. That was group 5. And at the click of a button, I open up group 5. So group 5, can you come up and talk to us? What's more, I might want to make comments on students' work. And there's no better way to get feedback than directly to where it relates to and the specific instructions about what you want. There's another for students is the ability for students to see other kids' work. Think about it. Now, when you assigned in the past, you had, and I didn't turn it on for you guys yet, but I can. Let me show you. Anytime I hand out copies, it allows students to do copies of other users. Is that it? That's it. I select that, hand out copies, and now you notice on your page, you'll be able to. Days when you used to get kids on chart paper to write up an answer so that you can make it big and visible, or you get ideas, it instigates ideas. All right, so that's in a nutshell how technology from a hardware or software perspective, finger, it's very, very intuitive, and we have no called temperature. We're not going to be doing shape or anything. So you need the smart behavior that when in the way. We want kids to be able to do whatever they want, independently and changing to promote collaboration. For you to learn more about it. But technology is definitely evolving, and it needs to evolve to align to some of these more evidence-based practices. Okay, last piece before I let you go. We talked about high yield effective practices. What are the conditions to actually get as many people doing this practices as possible? Well, the reality is, when Talis did a study on what are your biggest needs, teachers, your biggest needs is in professional development of your technology. Number two, number three things were specifically related to technology. I need help with technology. This is across the board. Now, the reality is global. The Global Implementation Initiative, remember that GII group, the information specialist, the director got on stage at last year's World Forum, and the first thing she said was, the reason why we're here is we haven't figured it out. We're all here to make a dent in it, to progress ourselves forward. You know, and just to paint the picture, this is Project Red. A couple of years ago, we did a one-to-one study where they looked at 1,000 schools that were implementing devices, and they were measuring different outcomes. So how has it reduced disciplinary action? How has it improved high test scores? How has it decreased dropout rates? Has it increased graduation rates? I mean, there's longitudinal study. The other thing that interested me was they actually looked at implementation. So they actually had a checklist for, did you do this, 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 and this? And if you got 80% on this checklist, that means you implemented effectively. Look at the different colored bars. So the first thing is red and blue are the schools that implemented the one-to-one, where no one-to-one. So clearly, red and blue are higher than blue, which means red and blue outperform gray, which means one-to-one had an impact. Now look at red compared to blue. Who are red? Red are the ones that implemented effectively. Red are the ones who implemented effectively. When you implement, remember, it's a multiplier. That's where that multiplier comes in. It's not just practice, it's implementation. Now here's the most important number. How many schools implemented effectively? Remember I said it was 1,000? 15. We suck at implementing. Right? We have to be cognizant of that. You have to plan for it. Here's home. One of the things that you can do, create an implementation team. It's a dedicated group of people that you say, your job is to get 80% of our staff in 3 years doing these behaviors. That's your job. Those that have an implementation team, on average, it takes 3 years to get 80%, find 80% success. Of those cases that do not have an implementation team, it takes an average 17 years to get 14% success. And this is this is from the Institute of Medicine and the U.S. Department of Education in 2009 and 2011 with the tracking implementation successfulness. Those that have teams are different. So what works? Have a definite team whose job is to focus on it. The other thing that we can learn, so John just had his world conference in the UK. He gets on stage and he says, guess what? There's a new number one thing. There's a new number one thing of graceful practice in students. And it's that teachers working together on the values of it. It's not enough to make learning visible, so it has an impact, right? I'd say you evaluate your own impact. You've got to be working, having that discussion with your colleagues. When you've made learning visible, when you create an AMP workspace, take that AMP workspace to a colleague and say, look, I just did that with them. Let's have a discussion about what I observed. And I need your feedback. How can I change this for them? Or when you're pre-planning in the morning, you say, this is what I'm planning to do with my students. This is the impact that I hope I had. What do you notice? Have a conversation with them. That's the new number one. There are things that we can do to help get there. One is assign a team to implement, dedicated team whose job is to focus on implementation. And the second thing is you gotta have teachers working together. Have to have teachers working together. When your strategy for implementation has to involve getting teachers to be working together with each other to evaluate what they're doing. I'm gonna end with this event I attended last year, which kind of synthesizes all of these concepts in the beginning when we talked about the definition of student success as changing the future skills, all the way through this concept of teaching working value. This International Summit of Teaching Profession actually just happened. It was in Germany last week. Every year, it's a different country, and high-performing countries across the globe get together. They have to bring a delegation. The minister, deputy minister, all the people that actually do the work in the ministry, president of the teachers union, high-end administrator, high-end teacher, award-winning teacher, award-winning administrator, and the students as well. There's selected seating. So you're not sitting at a table with anybody from your country. That's their not. They bring high-end speakers with microphones, advisor to ministers of education. OECD is there, and they share studies, new studies, and insight and research. And they get up there and they share for a brief period of time, and then they give time to dialogue and discuss those ideas in their group and to share. In our country, we're doing this, and this is why. This is what's working out. And we're taking notes. On the last day, the countries get together for 3 hours to share and synthesize everything that happened in those 3 days. What are the things that jumped out? What are the things that were most profound from the event that's jumping out? The minister has to decide, and the country has to decide on 3 things that they're going to action as a result of what they've learned from that concept. Well, I happened to be in the room. It was an epic experience. I took this picture. The minister was sitting on the table. I created this video because I couldn't believe what I heard from almost every single minister around that table. And the link is in the file as well.
Acting for a change of culture in teaching from working alone to collaboration. Collaboration. With collaboration. Better collaboration.
Collaborative synergy, professional level communities.
Collaborative learning.
And real forms of collaboration, deeper collaboration to grow and develop teaching practice for measurably improved student outcomes.
So what's super interesting about that experience is that it highlighted 2 things. First, why is it that almost every single minister pointed it out? Well, what they realized is that teachers weren't collaborating with each other frequently in their schools. And they noticed, and the researchers that they found in this event, was that those that did outperformed schools that didn't. Now what that tells us is that these teachers were byproducts of the very systems they're teaching, which means the systems failed to produce teachers who went into the workforce who would naturally collaborate with each other. So these are the employers who are saying, in our business, we need people who collaborate with each other because they're not doing it. And we know it's important. Right? They're the employers. And the second thing is, they realized that in order for us to have gains, we have to create opportunities for teachers to do it. And it's also a reflection that in their classrooms today, we have to be cognizant, are we creating multiple opportunities for our students to develop that skill of collaboration? You got to create those instances in our classrooms. Just like they're creating instances for teachers to do it, we have to create those instances for students to do it, developing those skills so they don't become those teachers who are not collaborating. So, to wrap it all in one sort of bundle, a definition of student success is changing. It's not just about developing students' cognitive ability, it's developing their cognitive and their social emotional skills. It's the whole child. To get there, we can take this framework. We have to be clear on what are the things that we know work, outperform other things. Not about doing things that we know work, but doing things that we know outperform all these other things that we can do. And then how do we get a mass group of people doing it? And spend just as much time focusing on that as we focus on that. So we can multiply. What are some concepts to remember about high yield impact? Create opportunities to expose learning. Make learning visible. Think about, am I creating opportunities that align with the way kids naturally learn outside the classroom? And then most importantly, getting us there, focus on getting teachers to collaborate. If you're a teacher, You need to start as of tomorrow finding a co-teacher. So you know what? Every day I want to spend time traveling every other day. Singapore, for example. OECD just brought them up. I used to do this here. Every day, a teacher has an hour to spend with another teacher to collaborate. They decide if they want to do it in the morning or evening. They have changed the time taming of teachers across the country for counseling. Singapore is one of the highest ranked countries in the nation university. All these countries, the top performing countries in cognitive skills, are already now looking at building opportunities to develop social emotional skills in their students as well. And also counseling, in fact, with teachers will happen to the building in this piece. So I'll leave my email if you want to get hold of me, my Twitter handle, and my YouTube channel if you want to take a peek there. If you want to copy this presentation, just I'll keep it in the description of this video. And you guys obviously can walk away with it too. But I'll stick around if there's any questions. I'm going to stop the stream. Those of you online that have questions, just send it to my email or feel free to tweet me, and I'll be happy to share that with you.